Okay, so this is going to be the guide to Iron Maidens in Blackrock Foundry. This footage was gotten on normal mode. Our group composition was 2 tanks, 3 healers, and 8 DPS. You want to have at least 4 or 5 melee DPS and or hunters, because these are the people who you want to be sending over to the ship. It's fine if you have to send 1 or 2 ranged over the ship, but it's more favored for melee on the ship. So try to have 4 to 5 melee plus hunters. Let's go over the boss abilities next. You got 3 bosses, and they each have their own individual abilities that need to be handled differently. You've got Enforcer Sorka, Admiral Garan, and Marok the Blooded. Admiral Garan's got the most abilities that you have to watch out for, with Marok having one that's pretty important, and Sorka's kind of just there to keep pressure on one of your tanks. I'll go over Sorka first because her abilities are the simplest, and Sorka's going to be the first target that you want to start DPSing. Sorka has, at the start of the fight, just one simple ability called something like Blade Dash, and it just randomly dashes around and does some damage to some of your DPS. It's pretty light damage, there's nothing you can do to mitigate it, so you just heal through it. Marok the Blooded starts out with an ability called Blood Ritual. He'll randomly target a ranged or melee player, and there will be a squiggly red line showing between Marok and that ranged player. You should have that ranged player step out to the side away from your ranged stack, and then the tank will have to stand between that ranged player and the boss, kind of like Acid Torrent on Ore Gorger, in order to take the bulk of the damage from the Ritual of Blood, which it does initially. So basically, Blood Ritual, step out to the side, tank, intercept it, everyone else stay away from it. Admiral Garan has the most dangerous abilities that you have to watch out for. Admiral Garan starts the fight with Rapid Fire, which is an ability that randomly targets a ranged or melee raid member, and spawns a circle around them. After a short delay, the circle will be impacted by missiles being fired at it. The circle will follow the player wherever they go, so this player should run in a pre-designated direction, and all other players should move away from that direction so that they don't get hit by the circle. The circle moves at like 50% speed or something, so it can pretty easily be kited. And basically it's avoidable damage, so you shouldn't really take any damage from it. You should kite it like I'm doing right now. The other ability that you have to watch out for in the first phase is also from Admiral Garan, and it doesn't come until a little bit after the first ship phase, and it's called Penetrating Shot. Penetrating Shot randomly targets a raid member, and then after about an 8-second delay, does a massive amount of damage to that raid member and anyone between Admiral Garan and that raid member. Now this damage is spread out between all targets who are hit by it, so it's a really good idea to try to get as many people between that raid member and the boss as you can within the 8 seconds that it takes to cast. So you want to have that person stand still like we do right now, and then everybody else just kind of moves so that they're intercepting the red line and they take some damage. The damage will be fatal if you take it by yourself. However, the damage the effect can be mitigated by Feign Death, Vanish, Invisibility. All of these abilities and similar abilities, such as the Priest's Stealth ability, I'm not sure what it's called, can be used to, if you make the boss drop target from you, then Penetrating Shot will stop. Also, if you use abilities like Ice Block or Bubble, where the boss can still target you but won't deal any damage to you, if you can get the rest of your raid, if you can communicate with them and get them to not stand in it, then you can just make yourself immune to the damage and mitigate the effect in that way. So that's all the abilities that the bosses start with or get early on in the fight before they go into their enrage phase at the end. So the next thing I would like to talk about is the ship phase. At certain intervals, around 2.5 minutes or so into the fight, and every interval length thereafter, one of the bosses, specifically the boss on lowest HP who has not been to the ship yet, will go over to the ship and spawn a few adds on that ship, which you need to go over to the ship and kill the adds on the ship. You're only allowed to send 6 players. It's recommended you send 4 DPS, 1 tank, and 1 healer to the ship, preferably melee DPS or hunters, for every ship except for Admiral Garan's, in which case you don't need a tank, so you can feel free to send a 5th DPS in place of the tank that would normally go. The hooks are positioned just off to the left of where we're stacking here on square. Set the red X you can see over there. That's where the hooks are. Right click on one of those, it'll send you over to the ship. So when you're on the ship, there's typically one ad that has to be killed, and depending on whose ship it is, there may be a few other ads that need to be interrupted or cleaved or otherwise ignored due to their lack of importance, and because killing them won't get you the ability to leave the ship. Once you've killed the important ad on the ship, you just need to run down to the far side of it where there are some explosives that are toggleable. Toggle the explosives and they'll send you back to the arena and end that phase. Now, for everyone who doesn't go to the ship during the ship phase, they have to stay back in the arena, and the ship will launch bombs in waves at the arena, as well as the bosses that are remaining continuing to do their regular mechanics. The bombs will typically launch in a first wave of 8 bombs. You need to move out of the bombs as they're being launched to their position, and then you need to stack back on top of the bomb immediately after it lands, as every available space other than where the initial bombs landed will be targeted by a second wave of bombs. So after the first bomb lands, you stack on top of it for the second wave of bombs to land in every other space. Then once the second wave of bombs land, you move on to a position where one of the second wave of bombs just landed. This is because the initial wave of bombs are going to turn red, start shaking, and then explode after the second wave of bombs lands. Once the first wave of bombs has exploded, you move back to one of the locations where the first wave of bombs was occupying, as the second wave of bombs will turn red, start shaking, and trigger immediately afterwards. That's pretty much all there is to do when you're back in the arena during the ship phase. Continue DPSing the bosses, but keep your priority on not getting hit by bombs, as that's completely avoidable damage and you don't want to put too much pressure on your healers, since they won't have a lot of time to stand still and cast during this phase. As you can see right now, we've forced the enrage on the boss without going to the third ship. We weren't actually sure if we were going to do this or not. There are arguable benefits for letting the bosses sit above 20% HP and forcing that third ship. You give your healers some time to regain mana. Our healers didn't really need it, so we just forced the 20% phase as soon as we got there. When one of the bosses gets to 20% HP, and I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but the bosses do not have a shared health pool, so you need to be cleaving them and multi-dotting for the entire fight. All of the bosses will gain their enrage abilities, and this is what you want to save your lust for. Sorka gains an ability that causes damage to everyone in the raid when she melee attacks your tank. It's not a large amount of damage, and if your tank has decent mitigation, it's not going to be what causes you to wipe. Admiral Garan gains an ability where she will occasionally drop turrets. You can see one over on the left. They sit and spin around shooting fireballs. You want to avoid the fireballs caused by the turrets and destroy them as quickly as possible. They're a DPS priority in this phase, but once the turret's down, you want to be focusing one boss down at a time. Marak the Blooded gains a buffed version of his Convulsing Shadows, which is an ability I didn't really mention earlier, since it's an ability you primarily want to ignore. It's a debuff that you can dispel, but when you do dispel it, it doesn't actually reduce the overall damage taken. It only makes the damage occur quicker. So basically the damage will just be more drawn out if you don't dispel the Convulsing Shadows. But nonetheless, Marak the Blooded is going to be the first one of the bosses you want to kill in this phase. So as soon as the bosses hit 20% and enter their enraged state, you want to lust, and you want to destroy the first turret, and then you want to go to Marak, and you only drop off Marak to destroy the following turrets. And then once Marak is dead, basically it's recommended to kill Admiral Garan second, but if for whatever multi-dotting reason Sorka is on lower HP, it's fine to just kill whichever boss is on lowest HP and get them out of the fight and their abilities removed as quickly as possible. that's really all there is to this fight. It's a pretty long fight. It can last upwards of 10 minutes, but the abilities are pretty simple, and once you get how they work and learn how to avoid them, you can get this fight down no problem. That's all. Hope you liked, and hope it helps you get a kill.